James Walters. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Rich. I'm glad to be here with you today.
I appreciate you coming on and being willing to open up and share your story with the creative community. Just a little bit of research that I've done on you for this. You've got quite a bit of experience in the world of photography and creative and that type of stuff. So,
Yeah, I've been behind the camera for a couple, well, 3+ decades now. So,
yeah. Let me give the audience a brief introduction here for you, so they'll get a little bit more of an understanding of who you are before we dive into the conversation. You are a accomplished wedding photographer turned storyteller. For years, you've captured intimate moments and outrageous mishaps at weddings, leading you to author the memoir Accessory to Marriage: Chronicles of Outrageousness from My Life as a Wedding Photographer, a hilarious, heartfelt collection of real life stories from behind the lens. Plus, you have two other books in the works: Plotting for Joyful Rebellion and Meditations of the Mundane, which is a photography coffee table book that you're working on. You're the host of the Joyful Rebellion podcast, where you've created and host this podcast exploring the pivotal moment when hard earned success feels empty, diving into honest conversations about reclaiming joy, creativity, and authenticity after life's hard resets. You're a creative mentor and multi hyphenate. As a dad, an educator, a mentor, and self described INFP innovator, you help others tell their stories through photography, video, portraits, especially environmental ones, and through audio. You're a passionate advocate for personal reinvention, which your work often centers around self discovery, overcoming unfulfilling paths, and using art and creativity to author one's own life. A lifelong creative with eclectic influences, influenced by 80s and 90s icons from Depeche Mode to REM, which you've crowned the greatest Southern rock band ever. You blend humor, Southern roots, and deep introspection to connect ideas and people in meaningful ways. So, I want to go back in time to start us off, and that is to where you were born and what was like like as a kid for James.
yeah. So I was born in Wilmington, North Carolina,
Okay.
right on the coast. So being a beach town, it was a sleepy little beach town back then. That was in the mid 70s, and there wasn't a lot going on because we didn't have the interstate yet.
Okay.
And interstate went from Barstow, California, dumped right into Wilmington, North Carolina, 2,000 some miles later in the 90s. So I spent my childhood in this kind of, I wouldn't say it's isolated, but it wasn't as popular as it is now, wasn't as easy to get to, and it's flat. I rode my bike everywhere. I put 100,000 miles, had to be, on that bike. And that was my biggest childhood memories. I grew up in that time where you just left the house and your parents were like, thank God they're gone.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like, okay, just be home by dinner. And yeah, that was my life, just roaming around. I mean, if you watch Stranger Things, it's kind of exactly that. I mean,
Right.
I grew up in those years at that age. So it was a lot of MTV. I say MTV raised me a little bit, uh,
Right on.
because I guess from the time I was it came on when I was 6 years old, was that first video. And
Yeah.
then until I left for college, I was pretty much in that. Didn't have a TV when I went to college. So, but besides, they were already into reality shows by the time I got to college.
Right.
So it kind of sucked anyway. But
I think that was the downfall of
oh,
uh,
yeah.
MTV at that point, was when they started doing reality shows. It was
This,
like,
I
what
wonder,
is
does it still
happening?
exist?
It does,
Okay.
but I think they've turned more into movies and big series production.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I I think they still have like a dedicated, scheduled programming, but I think they ventured more into the movie and a lot of the series that you see on Netflix or Amazon, that type of stuff.
Got it. All right.
Just an expansion. It's
Yeah.
definitely not the music channel anymore.
Yeah. The M has to stand for something else.
Yeah, I think that's where they're shifting it into movies, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, how was school for you? Were you one of the kids who wanted to sit towards the back of the class and observe, or were you more geared towards up the front, getting attention, answering questions, raising your hand?
Yeah, I was in the front for certain class. It all depended on the classes. So
Okay.
if it was like a science class, I was in it. I don't know why. But like if it was a math class, I was like, okay, let's get through this. Let's do what we got to do.
Right.
Unless it was a math class I could apply to my life, like geometry, I was all about that. I was like, okay, this actually makes sense. But it, like math for math's sake seemed like masturbation. I mean, it was like, what the hell are we? Why do I need to know this? And
Yeah.
to this day, I don't know, 11,000 some days later, I've never used algebra. Not one time, not once. And my
I have.
I know. And my teacher friends, they disagree. They're like, "You've used it, you just don't know." And I was like, "No, I've 100% hired people to use it for me and then apply whatever they figured out to my life." So that's the difference. If it was art class, I was right there. If it was English, I love that. I love the putting together of words and thoughts and ideas and reading about other people's experiences.
Yeah.
But if it was something just really dry, I was kind of in the back, just observing and probably daydreaming and hoping I got through it pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about your parents during that time? What type of work were they into?
Yeah, they were actually both working for the business. They started a business probably when I was like 5 or 6 years old. They started a landscaping business. So it was more my dad started that. And then my mom was doing the bookkeeping, doing a lot of the office stuff. And also she
Yeah.
was that they were adding to the family quite quickly. I was the first of 5 kids.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
she's kind of at home holding down the fort, but also taking care of all the business side of that
Yeah.
stuff. And I was uh I was the oldest, so I got to do a lot of hanging out with the siblings.
Right. Interesting. So your family had a basically outdoor environment in terms of work life scenarios.
Yeah, it was like in the summers, I was usually helping, especially in my teen years, I was helping a lot, just digging the trenches for the irrigation pipes and laying side in Wilmington, you had to lay side. You couldn't throw grass seed out because it would just burn up and dry out
Yeah.
basically overnight. So it was like laying those squares of sod on the yards, and that was kind of fun, actually.
Yeah. Nice. How about grandparents? Were they in your life as a kid growing up?
Oh man, they basically raised me. If I had to escape, I would go see my grandparents. They were a really uncomfortable bike ride away. They were probably 6, 7 miles away. But like I said, I was riding the heck out of that bike. When I went to college, I moved to a place where I didn't know about hills, and I took my bike, and it was this place 100 miles away, and it had hills. And I rode my bike one time. I was like, "This sucks. This I don't." I'm glad I didn't grow up here because I would have never ridden my bike.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just ride the bike for forever, and I would go visit my grandparents. I had two sets. They lived not far away from each other,
Okay.
and one set was working really hard all the time, and that was my mom's parents. And then my dad's parents, they were retired at the point where I was like 10 or 11 years
All right.
old.
Yeah.
So I got to really grow up with them. Grandma would make me a big sandwich when I would come over, and my grandfather would teach me about woodworking, teach me about gardening. So that's when I say I went to geometry class and I was like, oh, this makes sense. It's because I got to hang out with him, and we would have to cut wood on certain angles, and we'd have to measure arcs and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really applicable.
Right on. Yeah. I totally get that. My family's from East Tennessee,
Okay.
not too far away from North Carolina
Yeah.
there. So I grew up, my mom's parents had a farm at that point, and my grandfather was a Southern Baptist minister, so during the week, he was working on the farm, the garden, all that type of stuff, and then on the weekends, he would be out going to his church or going to somebody else's church and
Mm.
speaking and Saturday night singings and all that kind of stuff. So I know what the South is about.
Yeah.
Definitely know what the South is about. As you're moving into middle school, how are you seeing the world around you start to change in terms of entering that puberty stage? Hormones are changing. Everything seems to be going off kilter and tilt at that time period.
Yeah. I'm thinking back, started a different school. We started in 7th grade. We went to a different school out of elementary, and it was kind of a different world because you did feel like there were a lot of older kids around, even though they were like a year or two older than you.
Right.
It seemed like they were like 10 feet taller. And I guess that's when everybody's hitting that growth spurt at different times anyway, depending on how much of that good 1980s milk you drank with all the hormones in it. Yeah. But yeah, I just remember feeling, not really feeling awkward, but feeling like, man, there's a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different ways I could go here. And things started to feel not more important. I didn't feel anxiety about it, but it was like, hey, I should try this. I should try this art class. I should ask them if they think, like, the teachers, if they think I should take like a honors English class, because that might be cool. I don't really care. I'm not trying to make grades to go to any sort of college with
Yeah.
it, but it might keep me interested. And socially, I was always pretty, I would hang back and just be the
Okay.
observer. I had a
Yeah.
few really close friends, like maybe 3 tops. And
Mhm.
socially, that's what my battery could handle. We would go around the neighborhood. Some of them lived in my neighborhood, some were like 2 neighborhoods away, but
Yeah.
that's a 15-minute bike ride, not a problem. And
Right.
yeah, we would hang out. We would do the whole, like, even at that age, we were just tromping around the woods, seeing what was out there, just going to explore different stuff. It was a blast. And the awkward teenage years, those, I don't remember them much because I really, like, when it came to school, I feel like I either just floated or daydreamed through it.
Okay.
And yeah, everything worked out. But if on any given day someone watched me walking down the hall, they would be like, that dude's lost. Like, what? He might not know where he's going. But I was always observing. Like,
Right.
people would
Right.
literally come up, and people sometimes still do, and they're like, hey, are you looking for where you need to go? And I'm like, no, I'm here, man. I'm just
You're just checking
checking.
everything out.
Yeah, I'm checking it out. And I had a guy come up to me at a party, and he's like, hey, he said something like I was avoiding people or something like that. He didn't say it like he was upset by it, but he was just curious. Like, hey, I see
Right.
you just kind of hanging out in the corner. I was like, oh yeah. And then my lady I was with, she was like, oh yeah, he just observes everything. He's just taking it all in. And he's like, so what do you mean? And I was like, well, I know you're right-handed, and I know you have the same kind of pocket knife that I do. It's in your right pocket, which means you're right-handed. And I know that I gave him like 3 or 4 other things I had just met him. I don't even know if I remembered his name at that point, but I was telling him all these things about himself that I could observe from across the room. He's like, oh shit. Okay. Okay. I get you now. It's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I have the same characteristics. I've always just wanted to sit back in the corner and watch,
Yeah.
look people over, see what they're doing, see how they're moving, watch their expressions, um, notice the intricacies of the clothes that they have on, all of that type of stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, I've always been that way. I've never really been the one who wanted to step forward and start speaking, which is ironic that I'm now doing a podcast.
Yeah.
It's been a most eye-opening scenario for me over the last year with the first season under my belt, first year under my belt, and, I would have bet $1,000,000 against it,
Oh
2
yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
that there's no way I'll be doing a podcast. It's
It's a wild thing, isn't it? Because
yeah,
you get to have so many great conversations. And the thing I've loved about my life as a photographer, but also now as a podcaster that might be similar to what you're experiencing, I've always been able to dip into people's existence into their lives for a little bit.
yeah,
And with photography, I'm either at an event, and if it's for a company, I get to dip into the what that company's culture is like and see what they do, see what they talk about. And
yeah,
then if it's when I did weddings for so long, I was dipping into that family's, dynamic. All the, is the daughter, what's the relationship like with the mom? And then we've got her friends over here, and then we've got her cousins. They're wildly different people. And you get to see what's going on with people and the human experience. But podcasting is exactly the same. It's just more one-on-one, and
yes,
I get to dip into someone's story and their perspective. That's the thing I love the most. Like, hey,
yeah,
how did this thing happen to you in life, and then how did you come through it, and how are you now better for it? And then on top of that, bonus points if how did you take that experience and now you help other people who are having
for
that
sure.
experience? Yeah, it's so
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
fun.
Definitely, definitely. In middle school, are you starting to get that creative bug, that interest in wanting to see things and show things differently as well?
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I it started in earnest in high school, but in middle school, I think I was planting the seeds without knowing it.
Yeah,
And I would gravitate definitely toward the art classes, not because I was just trying to get out of doing like the what people call the air quotes real courses.
yeah,
I think
tech,
art is a really important, but I remember loving things that were like we had to take home ec in
yeah,
seventh grade. I remember we had to
yeah,
learn how to do some of the cooking stuff. And then the next semester we had to take shop class. And I was like, oh, I got this. Stand back, you guys, and hold my root beer kind of thing.
yeah,
And that was a lot of fun because it was a different form of creativity. You got to work with your hands. You got to say, okay, what if we take this? We're trying to make donuts today. What if we take this can of biscuits and we fry it a little bit longer? What happens? Do we get a crispier crust? Or so
yeah.
it was that kind of creativity of let's be curious, let's see what happens. And it I wasn't in a lot of the visual arts classes yet, and the
Okay.
ones I was in were pretty limited to painting or drawing or things you could actually do, which turns out I suck at. So those were a little frustrating. So I found other ways to try to be creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine being with your grandfather and working with your hands, that influenced a lot of that home ec confidence. Yeah.
It did. And not only that, I mean, they were like the perfect pair and examples of like my grandmother was the home ec person showing me how to fry up okra and showing me how to do all these things maybe in the kitchen. She also taught me how to sew, which was cool because like in high school I made a lot of my clothes. I was into skateboarding and all that stuff, so I could make my clothes. I could kind of mess them up and it didn't matter because we just go back to the fabric store and I'd
Yeah.
whip up something else. And that was a ton of fun. But yeah, then on the shop class side of things, my grandfather was teaching me how to like punch. We had this crazy book. It was so fun. It was like a big, thick, almost like a coffee table book, but it had all these DIY crafts. It was like a
Okay.
Better Homes and Gardens kind of thing. We would go through that book and we would take like a huge can of tomatoes, we would cut it and we would roll it out like the metal was flat, and we would
Yeah.
cut it out into a shape and then punch it and make a like a candle sconce that could hang on the wall. And it was cheap, but the experience of creating that and seeing, oh, we can take something we bought at the grocery store last week
Yeah.
and now is hanging on the wall, has got a candle in it, and that's kind of cool.
For
So
sure.
yeah, that book taught me way more than any other book I've ever read, probably at that age in my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. My grandma was the same way. She was always making my little sister clothes.
Mm.
Uh, she was my little sister's 9 years younger than me, and then I've got a older half sister who's 7 years older. So
Mm.
it's kind of a multi-generational scenario going on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Um, Older sister, she's always lived in Tennessee. Younger sister, she was with us until she got married, and then she moved to upstate New York with her husband, where his family's from. But my grandma was always making clothes for my little sister and everything. And at that point in time, like I was really starting to look at fashion and be very much interested in it. And the first album that I ever got was Kiss Dress to Kill.
Oh yeah.
And if you remember that album cover, they're standing on a corner in New York City with their makeup on, but they're all in suits and ties. And then they got the big platform shoes. And
Yeah.
I was like, "That is so cool." And from then on, I was like, I saw my grandma, what she was doing with the sewing machine, making these clothes for my sister, and I'm like, "Will you make me something? Will you make me something?" And she would always say no, and I don't know if it was a scenario of boys aren't supposed to be interested in this stuff or
Yeah.
what, but eventually, I was able to get her to make me some vests and
Okay.
things like that. They were probably from her perspective geared more towards a boy or a guy's clothes or anything. But and then my mom, she sewed a little bit as well. She learned that from my grandmother. And at 14, I designed my first garment, which at that point I was playing soccer
Mm.
and I would get these catalogs for soccer equipment and the goalie shirts were always like super expensive at that point in time. It was really expensive to me. We weren't that well off as a family, but we got by and everything was provided that was needed.
Yeah.
But I drew it up on a piece of paper and I asked my mom, I'm like, can you help me make this? Because I'm about to start soccer season and I need a keeper's jersey. She's like, all right, well, let's go to the store and see what kind of fabrics they have. So she took me to the fabric store and I picked out my fabric that I wanted, picked out the colors that I wanted, and then we got a basic pattern for a polo type shirt.
Okay.
And I just told her, I said, all right, based on my drawing, I want to make adjustments here and here so that it fits more like a goalkeeper's jersey. She's like, all right. And she helped me make it. So that was my first
That's
garment I ever
cool.
produced was at 14.
That's cool.
But yeah, those are the things that always interested me the most as well, was the things that you could create from something else.
Yeah.
It was always drawing my attention, and I from that point on, that's how I started looking at everything. Like, all right, how can I take it? How can I make it better? How can I
Mhm.
improve on it? What kind of changes can I do? Can I tear it apart even?
Oh yeah. I was bad about that. I would tear stuff apart.
Yeah. Moving into high school, another shift in societal adventures. How did that affect you in terms of you still wanting to potentially be the observer, or did you start to engage a little bit more once you got into high school?
I was still engaging kind of one on one
Yeah, with the close friends.
with the close friends, but the whole friend dynamic changed because some of the people didn't translate from middle school into high school. Some of them did, but then some were still there. We all went to the same high school, but some just went away. Literally, one of my closest friends in 6th and 7th grade, we went to high school. I did not see him one time until our 10-year anniversary or whatever you call that reunion.
Yeah.
Not one time because he got swallowed up by sports. And
Okay.
he was constantly, he didn't have time to hang out. He didn't have time to do anything. He was like trying to get on a major league baseball team and all that stuff. And he went through college. He played baseball. He got up to pick for a minor league team. And then, man, I felt so bad when I heard about this, but I didn't hear about it until years later, but he blew his arm out in the first
Mm,
game or two
yeah.
after working that hard for that long. But when it came to one-on-one, I had still had my close friends, and there were just a few of them, but I think I went even deeper into observation mode because I just remember as people talk about high school, I've talked to some of my close friends who were like, yeah, I didn't like high school at all. I don't even want to go to the reunion. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't have that experience. I felt like I kind of floated through it.
Uh-huh.
And I was also looking back, you learn so much more, but looking back, I had a couple of friends or acquaintances with almost every group. So
Mm,
I was pretty much the United Nations of all the drama geeks, all the nerds, not all of them, but you know, I had people who were on sports teams, and I was like, yeah, hey, we're cool. And
right.
people who were wildly different who would never hang out with those. I was like the little hub, and these were all the spokes. And
Right.
I don't know what that is, but well, I do know what it is. There was something about each one of them that interested me.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, okay, let's hang out with this person and figure out why they tick this way.
Right.
And
Right.
then let's hang out. And I would say most of them were acquaintances. And that's how I even moved forward into my like college years, into my adult years, where I have a lot of acquaintances I might see ever so often. And then we'll catch up because I think there's something interesting about them, or they want to know what I've got going on. But then the friend group stayed really tight. It just shifted a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Did you find that skateboarding allowed you to see a cross section of culture perspective as well?
Just a little bit, only because I was out in the suburbs. So I
Okay.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
in Wilmington is not a huge town. I mean, the suburbs was probably 6 miles from downtown where I was. And then I was like 2 miles from the beach, and then like 5, 6 miles from downtown. So there was 2 miles away from me, there was this whole surfer culture.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of out in the suburbs doing my skateboarding thing. And to really go like to find ramps and stuff like that, we would have to go about 20 minutes, 25 minutes down to Carolina Beach, which was a whole
Okay.
different place. And that's where we actually got to meet a lot of other people from, different age ranges, different walks of life, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I met a few, but again, I was never that person to go up and say, hey, what's going on? How you doing? It was more when I went to college that I started having those experiences of being around a lot of people who were not like me and were not like people that I grew up with in the burbs.
Yeah, for sure. Did you ever get into the surf culture at all, being that close to the beach and the water?
I don't know why, but I never did. I think I got somebody convinced me to get is it a guy from like youth group or something when I was in high school. He would go surfing. He's like, just try it once. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got on the surfboard. I don't think I ever got up on a wave, but I was like, yeah, that's cool. I mean, I can see why you would like it. And then I
Right.
went back on my skateboard. And it's wild. People look at me like I have horns growing out of my head when I'm like, yeah, I grew up at the beach, but I don't really like the beach. Like the beach is cool if people want to go there. I'm good. I don't need the grit. I don't need the,
Right. Right. Yeah.
but I go scuba diving. I like that, but just
Okay.
because that gives me something to do. There's cool stuff under that you can
Under.
see. But
Yeah.
when it comes to just like bobbing up and down in the water and getting sand in my waistband and my shorts, I'm like, I could,
Not that comfortable,
I'd be
not
fine
that
to skip
enjoyable.
that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with like my friend invited me to the beach last year in August, and she's like, "Yeah, we'll be there for like 4 or 5 days." I was like, "The hell do you do for 4 or 5 days at a beach? It's sand and it's like this
Right.
water out there." And she's like, "Well, we relax." And I'm like, "That sounds awful. Like, are you serious? You
Really?
relax?"
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with that, but I did hang out with her for 2 days, and I had my fill, and I was like, I need to go unrelax now. I need to go do something interesting.
A movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Do
get it.
something. Yeah.
I get it. You mentioned youth group. Was your family into church and stuff like that as you were growing up?
Off and on, I'd
Okay.
say. Like my mother's parents were really my mother's mom, I'll put it this way. She was Southern, she was mostly Baptist, and she was pretty religious my whole growing
Yeah.
up. My parents, as I was growing up, kind of bounced around from church to church, and I didn't really ever know what that was about, but sometimes it was Baptist, sometimes it was Presbyterian. We ended up at one that was a Presbyterian, and the years that when I was in high school. So that's
Okay.
when I was in youth group, and usually I was in youth group trying to get out of going to the church service, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was my
Totally get
goal, and that's how I got out of having to sit and read from the hymnal and all that stuff. I would go hang out in the youth group, and so that it wasn't it was cool socially. I got to meet a lot of people I would not have met in school.
it. Mhm.
But then again, I wasn't a super social person, so I was like, take it or leave it. It
Right.
just is getting me out of this thing where I have to sit beside my parents and act really, formal for an hour and whatever on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that my parents, it was kind of I don't want to say as it was convenient because we did go a lot when I was in those years, but
Okay.
there were some years that didn't.
Yeah. I get it. Totally get it.
Yeah.
Especially e especially if you're bouncing from different churches, you know, at
Yeah.
different periods in time. They all have a different perspective on, what they think is the right way to go.
Well, and I should also add to that during the years of fourth, fifth, and part of sixth grade, they sent me to a school that was a Baptist
Okay.
school. So it was a private Baptist
Yeah.
school, which kind of beat the Baptist out of me. People are like, "Oh, come on and dance." I was like, "I can't dance. I was raised Baptist. That's not, we don't do."
Right.
But in those years, that was 1984, that was 1985. If you think about what was going on back then, I mean, like Thriller
Yeah.
was just coming out, right? It came out in 1983, but by the time we got it, it was 1984. We
Right.
started hearing it, and then Madonna was coming on the scene, all this stuff, and now I'm in this school where they're like, "Well, that's the devil's music," and I'm like, "The hell are you talking about? I just heard it on the radio, and Satan
Right.
was not spinning tunes that I recall. So
Yeah.
who are you?" And so that was my experience for a couple of years, and I was like, "What is going on here?" And
Yeah.
all the while, we didn't go to that church, but I went to that school all the time, and it was so fundamentalist. And you got to remember, also, it was the '80s. We had that whole satanic panic,
Yep.
right? If you, yeah, I remember someone calling me up and saying, "Oh my gosh, if you look on the back of a tube of toothpaste, there's this little symbol on like Crest toothpaste, and that's because they worship Satan." And I was like, "Are they for real right now?" But I was 11 at this
Yeah.
point. What was I
Yeah.
gonna say? So yeah, it was a wild time to be alive.
No, I get it. It's the same scenario.
Yeah.
From 4th grade through high school, my parents pulled me out of public school and
Mm.
went to Baptist private school. Same scenario, same belief at that point in time in the world.
Yeah.
Uh, all the music is bad and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Ozzy Osbourne is the Antichrist, and
Right.
Dee Snider is devil worshiper and all this kind of stuff. And I was always of the mindset of this doesn't sound like it's all the truth. They may be sprinkling in something that's truthful there, but it doesn't sound like it's all of the answer to
Yeah.
me. Later on, obviously, when you get out into the world, you realize it's all just marketing.
Yeah.
It's not any of that stuff. I mean, I watched a thing the other day where Dee Snider's in his 70s and he tried mushrooms for the first time ever in his life for some healing work he was trying to do. Never did drugs, never alcohol, none of that stuff. Kind of Gene Simmons scenario as well. And it's like, whoa, these guys were like back then we would have called them straight lace,
Yeah.
straight edge even, but no, they were out in the rock and roll world doing what was the evil lifestyle a scenario.
Yeah. Basically leaving it to everyone's imagination
Yeah,
what they were
exactly.
like. Yeah. And
Exactly.
isn't it weird how people fill in the blanks for them?
They do.
Yeah.
They do just without even thinking twice about it. They'll start filling in blanks,
Yeah.
which is wild. Definitely wild. As you're getting towards the end of high school, are you seeing photography as something that you are really wanting to look at more and more as a potential career path? Or did that come with going to college?
Yeah. It was pretty much solidified by the time I was toward the end of my junior year. And
Okay.
I took my creativity from DIY things with my hands in terms of shop and sewing and some of that. And I realized I needed to get creative on how to get out of taking Algebra 2.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what? Like I said, math for math's sake, I'm not there
Right.
for it. So especially when they started mixing up the alphabet with numbers and they wanted me to figure that puzzle out, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm out of here, you guys. So what I figured out, and I don't know how I figured this out, but I had already taken a photography course in 11th grade.
Okay.
And so in theory, you weren't allowed to take it again. But I said, well, what if you guys count it as a science instead of an elective? Because it's technically a science. They were like, huh, okay. So they allowed it. And I took it again in my senior year. And
Oh,
I was in
cool.
the dark room again. I was with the same teacher, and she was like, "This is really kind of weird, but if they said it's okay, it's okay." And then I was like, "Okay, here's another thing, guys. What if I take this course at the community college in my senior year, and it's a photography course, but you guys count it as, I forgot what I got them to count it as, but it canceled out me having to take Algebra 2." And
Right on.
I could still graduate and all this stuff. I'm sure they wouldn't do that now,
Yeah.
but this was prehistoric times, so it worked out. And I was able to leave school early and I would go take this class. I think it was like almost a night class at the community college downtown, work in the dark room, do all the stuff I love to do. And then luckily a guidance counselor, because I had to go to them to get all of these things that they were letting me do with the credits and getting all of these permissions. And
Right.
they were like, you seem to like photography. And I'm like, no shit, really? You think? It
Yeah.
was interesting. It was fascinating to me. And I was really getting into it, but I never thought about it as a career until the guidance counselor was like, well, you can go to college for that and you can get a job doing it. And I was
Oh,
like,
cool.
huh. So she showed me this school that was like 3 hours away. And I was like, that's cool. So I went in, I visited that school. I saw that they had the labs, they had the studios, they had this rich history of training people. And not only that, but 2 towns over, there were the biggest studios in the whole world right there. And
Oh,
so few people know, but High Point, North Carolina, at that time had had three of the largest studios, like square footage wise.
uh-huh.
They still have one of them, but back then there were many studios, and it was because of the furniture industry.
Ah,
So the
okay.
furniture industry would make their furniture. It would still be made in the USA. They would bring it to High Point. They had a huge show every year. They still do twice a year, spring and fall. And these studios all throughout the year would just be churning out these photos, these marketing materials, and all this
Right.
stuff to support that huge industry. And this little school was preparing people not only for the photojournalism world, but for commercial photography too. And I never had any dreams of going out and photographing furniture, but I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, I want to photograph something cool. So let's start here. And that's what I did.
Very cool. It's fascinating to me, and I saw this in an interview I was doing yesterday. The mindset of you in your junior year figuring out and presenting a scenario where you could take the same class over again. Being that innovator, as we read off in the intro, right? And it's a component of creativity and being a creative where you're becoming your own advocate
Mm,
for what you want to do in life. And you figured out a scenario and presented it to essentially skip all the stuff that you didn't really want to have to deal with that they were saying were core curriculum,
yeah.
and shifted yourself more into that creative world that allowed you to express, that allowed you to observe and discover all of those types of things. And I think that's a key thing that not many creatives um, will take on for themselves, is
Mm,
being their own advocate. But it's essential because if you allow other people to dictate what your creative career is and what it's going to be, then you potentially will not have one whatsoever.
true.
Or you'll stop at some point in time just because you get burnout.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's,
And
I mean, that was, as I think back on that and I try to explain it to people, it's hard for me to explain because that was a long time ago, first. And then second, advocating for myself was not my first response as a person
yeah,
growing up. I was that fly under the radar person and
yeah,
like, don't make waves. We're going to be fine. As long as nobody notices you're over there, they're not going to get you or ask you to do anything. And that was my MO until I realized, oh, if I really want to get what I want here, I'm going to have to speak up.
yeah, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. But again, I'm going to put it back on you that you are your own advocate, because even as that fly on the wall wants to just be there and watch
Yeah.
everything, right? You still, in your mind and in your soul, you're having to figure out, how can I still be that fly on the wall?
Yeah.
What can I do to mold this world that I'm in that I really don't want to participate in full fledged,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But I've got to some extent. So let me figure out how I can just maneuver
Yeah.
and make it so that I'm still in a comfortable space to be able to observe and do what I want to do.
Yeah. And there have been several times in life where I've had to rise to the occasion. And I've learned something about myself as an adult. I'm much more of a sprinter than I am a marathoner. So
Yeah.
if I know, and my work life and my lifestyle kind of support that, because if I am going into a job or into a production now, I know it's going to be like 100%. And then we're going to have a long time where we're doing post production, and I can operate kind of at like 60%, and it's going to be okay. So those, I see that pattern show up in my life a lot where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. We're going to rip the Band-Aid off. We're going to go fully into it. I'm going to do something or things that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, but I know
Yeah.
they're not going to last very long. And then we're going to pull back and get back into our comfort zone a little bit and create.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. What was the college that you went off to?
It's called, now it's called Randolph Community College. So it went from a technical college to a community college after the 90s. But yeah, it's in Asheboro, North Carolina. It's like in the 90s, it was like one of the top 5 photo schools in the country. And in today's world, it's probably there's a much smaller group of photography schools because they've been kind of falling away, but it's still there, it's still going strong.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool to know that that is the case,
Yeah.
especially with the iPhone and,
Yeah.
cameras and all that kind of stuff. It's cool that there is still a place where you can go and learn the traditional scenario way. With stepping into that world, which was presented to you, and you realize, okay, this is the opportunity. This is where I can see something potentially evolve. How did that make you feel stepping into one of those first classes and hearing from instructors that are specifically talking about what you're really into?
Yeah, it was almost magical because it was that intersection of the science and the art that I love so much.
Yeah,
Because I would geek out on like chemistry had a lot of math in it, but for some reason I got it because the math had something behind it. It had
had a
like,
purpose.
this is how these things come together. And then when I'm in photochemistry, that's one of the first classes you get into, and I'm learning about silver halides and how light hits them, and when the light hits this little particle, it it turns that particle, it basically tarnishes the silver immediately, and that's how you get a film negative, and it's at a microscopic level, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
And I'm just geeking out over here, but also at the same time I'm thinking about, okay, what can I do with that? Like, what can I create with it? And I was pretty intentional. Like the summer before I went off to school, I took several classes locally, like the psychology and the English and all that stuff you have to take
yeah,
outside of the photos, because I wanted to be just focusing on, when I got there, I wanted to be focusing on taking pictures, developing pictures, all the things about pictures. And it was mentally, it was kid in a candy store time
nice.
for
Yeah,
me, because I got to really go down a rabbit hole so much farther than I'd been able to before, because like YouTube wasn't around. There was no way to learn about this stuff unless you got books, or you took courses or workshops or things.
yeah, for sure, for sure. How was the new environment? You mentioned earlier that it really shifted for you being at college, but how was that in terms of your preferring to be standing back versus now I'm in a world where there's people here from all different strokes of life and I'm seeing these different things. I want to engage, or were you still standoffish?
I was I was present, but
Okay.
observing. So
Yeah.
I would go, and there were most everyone was a little bit older than me. I had a roommate. He was, I think, a year, maybe two older than me, but he was also from my hometown. Never met him before, but he was roommate, and he was pretty cool. But there were other students that were like 5, 6 years older than me, and I've never really hung around in a social or work setting with
Yeah.
people who were that. They were either a lot older than me, like my parents' age,
Mhm.
or they were my siblings who were younger than me. And I wasn't used to all of the, I guess, shenanigans might be the best way. I was pretty insulated
Okay.
as a kid. I got to ride around on my bike, but I didn't really get into a whole lot of trouble. So just seeing these people, oh, let's go. Because at that point, Asheboro was a dry town. So they were like, yeah, let's go next town over, get a pack of beer. And I'm like, I'm 18. And also, I think beer tastes nasty. So I'm going to sit here and I'll wait for you guys to get back. And then I'll watch you act like fools for the next 3 hours. And
Right.
then next week, we'll be laughing about it for, a couple days.
Yeah.
So that was my role in this. So I was present. I was there. I was hearing all these different conversations, seeing all these dynamics. But I don't know if you could say I was participating in all the fun. I was, again, more observational.
And also too, it's somebody else's perception of fun,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's
Your
right. Yeah.
your fun was the camera, the world of being in the photography classes, the dark rooms, the areas where you were mixing chemicals to get, a picture to come to life on a piece of paper, that was blank kind of a scenario from, initial first sights, it's just white. But
Hmm.
once you put it into the chemicals, then something starts taking place and you see something come to life. And that's one of the things about photography that always fascinated me was the fact that you literally would have a blank piece of paper, but when you slipped it into one of those pans with that chemical in it, after a few seconds of just a little bit of movement,
Yeah.
you would start to see that image come to life. And it was like, holy cow, how is that even possible? Only had one photography class in college, but that was the most fascinating part of it for me, was that aspect. I never really got comfortable with a camera because for me, there were like too many components and things that you had to do with those components to adjust them for different ratios and aspects of, you know,
Yeah.
what you're trying to capture. Like, for whatever reason, my brain couldn't hold on to how many process steps I needed to do before I could hit click
Yeah.
and get the picture taken. And eventually after that, it was like I can draw and keep my attention more
Okay.
intact with what I'm seeing in my head
Yeah.
versus the photography components. But I've always found it fascinating, and I've always loved working with photographers whenever I was doing fashion shows or, doing a photo shoot for fashion.
Hmm.
Uh, Even when I've started designing jewelry, we had to hire a photographer to take product images and then put them on models and all that kind of stuff. So I always loved it. I always felt it was that added piece of ingredient to the creative process that was easily collaborative. Just getting in with the photographer and saying, this is what my idea is. And then I always tried to find somebody who had a skill set that was close to what I had in my head, and then just shared the idea and let them go to work. Like, I didn't try to dictate, oh, I want this angle, I want that angle, I want this headshot. I was just like, this is the idea, this is the concept, here's the mood board. You do what you do,
Yeah.
and let's see what happens. And that was always a fascinating thing for me over the years of working with photographers. Um, when you're starting to see more and more the possibilities as you're going through each year of college of where you potentially can go or may want to go with
Mhm.
this new skill set, what is your mind starting to think and what are you starting to craft as your way forward?
Yeah, they luckily they had a really good program in after the summer of the first year, you could decide which one of the concentrations you went into. So they had four at the time, and they've shifted over the years. So, for example, back in the 90s, they had one called photo finishing, which was like photo lab kind of stuff,
Mhm.
which they don't have anymore. But then they also had photojournalism, they had commercial, and then they had a portrait and wedding track. So I
Okay.
decided to go. I didn't want that photojournalist life. I didn't want to be like a nomad and wander around. I wasn't trying to chase a story. Plus, I was still at the point where I was like, people, not really into it.
Yeah.
And that took me to commercial photography because I loved creating through the lens of the camera things that people couldn't see, even if they were looking at the same thing I was looking at. I would be seeing it either from a different angle or with a different lens that would show it in a completely different way than you would with your naked eye. So that's what really got me into commercial photography. Plus, I could limit my contact with humans because a lot of what I wanted to do was product photography at first. Again, I was still at this point 19, moving on to 20, and I was like, okay, I just want to practice my craft. And the concentration I was in required two different internships.
Okay.
So that was kind of a nice track to go to. I went to two places. One was in High Point. It was a furniture studio and they accepted interns and I got to learn a ton about lighting. We were still lighting furniture, which I was like, that's okay. But I want to do something cool,
Yeah.
which every teenager thinks that way, right? You don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but just whatever it is, it's not cool enough to what non-existent imagination can cook up right now. So work with some great people learned a ton in that experience. It was only 6 weeks long though. So
Okay.
then came back to school for, I don't know, another semester or so, and then went on the second internship. That was getting close to the end of school. And that one hired me on.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, right out of school, I was able to move into my first job with a big studio. And it was a little studio at that point, but they ended up buying a huge studio out several years later, which was super
Okay.
interesting. But yeah, I got to learn a lot. And I also got to see my path kind of unfold as I
Okay.
was stumbling through it. Yeah.
What type of company was it in terms of what their main focus was?
So it's interesting. The second one, the one I went to work for, their main focus was pre-press, which at
Okay.
that time, pre-press is everything that happens after the photography and everything that happens before it hits the printing press. And
Right.
that meant scanning film. That meant color correction. That meant actually placing it. And it wasn't as easy to do back then as it is now, but it meant placing it in the ads, all the graphic art kind of stuff. So this company, they were based out of Ohio. They moved a satellite operation to Greensboro, North Carolina,
Okay.
which is where I ended up moving. And they opened up a little digital photography studio. And digital at that time was like, whoa, okay, cool. But it was also like, really digital? Because digital wasn't great quality yet. It was cool technology, but it
Yeah.
wasn't great quality. It hadn't proven itself by any means. So we still had some clients who were like, yeah, we just please shoot film. We don't trust the digital camera. And it was so expensive to buy a camera. It was like tens of thousands of dollars. And then you got to hook it up to a $10,000 computer that had like, I think 4 megabytes of storage. It was crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. The I think that's an experience that most creatives who are entering the photographic world um, don't have the comprehension of how much work pre-press was required before it literally went to the printer. And even at that point in time, too, there wasn't a whole lot of digital printing taking place. It was still regular press printing.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective, that's a whole bunch of knowledge in terms of process, what it takes to get from your camera to a layout and then to the press. And then you got to check everything when it comes off of the press to then go back and recalibrate
Yeah.
everything. I was fortunate enough growing up and again, going to Tennessee, during summers and holidays and stuff like that because I'm in Metro Detroit.
Okay.
So my parents came up to Michigan because of the auto industry. My dad was a mechanic, so it was easy for him to find work when I was young. Actually, they came up here before they had me. About 2 years after they were here, they had me. So I've grown up mostly in the Detroit area, just a little bit southeast of Detroit, about 25 minutes. We got an Air National Guard base here, and his sister and brother-in-law were stationed there at that time. So again, it was a scenario of, all right, I can find the work.
Mm.
Also, my sister's here, my brother-in-law. So it's not like I'm going to be around nobody that I know. It'll,
Yeah.
it'll be some family. But yeah, going back to Tennessee, for the holidays and summers, my uncle worked for a company called Card and Label, and they were a huge printing company for R.J. Reynolds and
Mm.
playing cards and different things like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
So he was a pressman, QC pressman. So he knew that I'd like to draw and all that kind of stuff. So he'd bring me home a roll of paper that was not going to be used for anything else. But
Nice.
for me, it was like all kinds of space to be creative.
That's cool.
And then he gave me my first little magnifier that he would put on the print to make sure
Yeah.
the registration lined up.
Oh yeah. The loop.
So
I did that.
Yeah, he would always, have those conversations with me about what it would take for my drawings or my creations to end up going through the printing process. So I was getting some real world information just from being around it drawing
Yeah.
because my uncle was, around and I always thought he was the coolest thing. He had a uh, 70, 71 Barracuda
Nice.
for a long period of time. And one of his good buddies had a Corvette, 70s Corvette back then. So it was like, oh, he's cool. He's got the cool cars. He smokes cigarettes because he works at the printing press where they print for Marlboro and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I just wanted to be around him. And then my aunt, his older sister, my mom's older sister as well, she worked for Levi's
Oh,
at the time.
cool.
She was an industrial engineer. So she worked with all the plants, making sure that the production was set up right and all that kind of stuff. And at that time, there was still manufacturing in the US. It had manufacturing in Knoxville. So she was doing that type of stuff. So even from that perspective, I would get her input on if I was drawing a garment out, trying to get my grandma to make it for me.
Yeah.
She would come in and be like, all right, I see what you're drawing there. Just keep in mind, somebody else is going to have to make that for you. So just remember, you need to make it as simplified as possible, but still keeping, your aesthetic the way you want it. And I have to be cut up into pieces, and then somebody's going to have to put it back together. So I got two different perspectives of everything that I was going to eventually be utilizing through my own art careers,
Yeah.
whether it was fashion or whether it was printing or working with clients that needed printing. I was getting that information. So when I talked to somebody else who was literally in that world and learning how it was done from the non-digital perspective, it's fascinating to me because I understand it. And it's not stuff that you hear a lot of today
Yeah,
where with everything being digital.
for sure.
So that's super cool from my perspective and having this conversation with you. Once you get into that job with that company and you're starting to realize, all right, this is where I'm meant to be. Are there thoughts of, all right, there may be a ladder that I need to climb within this company? Or are you starting to envision, like you did in high school, all right, how can I take what's here in front of me and turn it into what I really want to step into?
Yeah, I think at first I was just along for the ride because there was so much to absorb,
Yeah,
and a lot of it I learned in school, but it's just like any school, they teach you the fundamentals, they teach you the basics, but when you get out there and you have to put all of that together, it's like, whoa, this feels different. And it's not really necessarily, but when you're young and it is your first rodeo, so to speak, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was like I was wide eyed and I was like, okay, let's do everything we could possibly do, learn everything I could learn. And then the very first jobs I was on were just little drugstore ads. And, we get a bottle of shampoo kind of
yeah,
thing. And then we get a little toy car. And then eventually we got different clients who, like, catalogs were still a big thing back then. So we would start shooting for different catalogs like home goods or things to decorate your house kind of stuff, and those were cool because those included some styling. Like, you don't have to style a bottle of shampoo very much, you just sit it
right.
down and get the right angle and get the lighting nice. But when it came to soft goods styling, when it came to, even we would build tiny little rooms to showcase some of these things. And then after about 2 years in, I was like, you know what, I wanted to do this and do product photography because I didn't want the complexity of people yet, because people move, people have expression. There's a lot more complexity to photographing a person than there is to a product. No matter how complex the product is, it just sits there until you get the lighting right. But
Yeah.
people get hungry, people start sweating, people get nervous, and you got to work with that. So after about 2.5 years, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a new challenge. And we happened to get a new client, and they wanted us to photograph kids on the toy. They would have, it was a department store. So they had a
Okay.
toy section, and they would want kid models to come in and just sit on the toy car or sit, on the toy horse, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's cool, because there's only so much you can get a little kid to do anyway.
Yeah.
And we would get there, we would have a person that kind of wrangled them, and then I would be taking the pictures. So then it became more about timing, it became more about encouragement to
Right.
the other person. So the level of complexity kept building and building, and that's what I was really fascinated about. It wasn't like a, hey, how can I get up in the ranks, because there were only 3 photographers in this
Okay.
studio. It wasn't a large place yet. A few years later, it would quadruple in size because we would move, but it was still a nice little ecosystem to learn in. It was a good nurturing environment, great people, and I was just soaking it all in at that point.
What are what are you doing for extracurricular stuff at that point in time in life too? Also, because now you've got a job, some money, you're not at home anymore, so you don't have that environment you have to worry about from somebody telling you you got to do this or you got to do that or you can't go here, you can't go there. How is that starting to shape your personal life in terms of freedom?
Yeah, it was interesting because I left school, went straight into my first job, but
Right.
I also, as sometimes we tend to do in the South, I decided to go ahead and get married too, because I had a high school sweetheart,
Okay.
and we were 20. We had dated off and on, but all through high school, a little bit in middle school, like eighth grade, and
Okay.
then took the summer off, and then we back at it. It was one of those deals where eventually we were like, you know what? Let's just what are we doing? Let's just get married. Come on.
Okay.
And so we did. And I got my college diploma. I got my first job, and I got married within like 2 months of each other.
Oh, wow.
So that's what my extracurricular, it was like us doing little things on the weekends, doing projects. We didn't have a house yet, but we would do little projects just to make life a little cooler. But we
Yeah.
had all that newlywed, sparkle and glitter going on.
Right.
And that's what was going on for probably the first couple years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was that for you from the interpersonal scenario? Was it a feeling of I'm really with the person I think I want to be with for the rest of my life?
Yeah, definitely. We, with us, and I don't, in hindsight, of course, everything becomes clear in hindsight, but I don't know that either one of us were doing this in a healthy way, but you don't know at age 20. But
Sure.
we were both the oldest in our family.
Okay.
We kind of almost grew up together in the sense that after a certain point, like we were, like Forrest Gump says, we were peas and carrots. Like we were always with each other. In hindsight, I think maybe we were banding together to be each other's support system to sort of
Mm,
break out of our family dynamic. Not
right.
that our family dynamics were bad or anything, they were just not where we wanted to be. So we both left our hometowns like right after high school. We went to college in totally separate towns for the first couple of years, and then
Oh,
eventually we both moved to Greensboro when right after we got married. She continued a couple more years of school. I went right into work, and yeah, it was one of those things where it was kind of us against the world,
yeah.
and that was a lot. That was a lot of comfort at the time, I think, for both. The whole world was new. Everything was new. You know, she was starting a new school. I was starting a new job, but we had each other to back each other up. We had a support system.
Yeah. And then once you get to that place with the job where now you're starting to see, oh, I'm working with a human and a product, how does that start to change your mindset of what you may want to step into?
Yeah, it was it was good in a way that it helped me ramp up the complexity of my technical skills.
Okay.
And at the same time, I started to realize something, and this didn't come until a few years later. I'm kind of a slow burn person.
All right.
So if I'm working through something, it might take me where somebody can be like, "Oh, yeah, I got this skill in a couple of months." I might have the skill in a couple of months, but I don't feel like I have the skill for another couple of years until
Yeah.
I can sort of do it with my eyes closed. And I always come up with, like, if you can get on the job unconscious and do your job, then you're where you kind of want to be. That's not very healthy, but technically, like skill wise, that's probably where you want to be. But also, if you find yourself there, you need to throw another challenge your way.
Yeah.
And that's what I started to realize with working with people. I wanted to ramp up the challenge a little bit more. So a couple of years later, I started working on projects that were a little more complex and required a little more nuance than kid toys. Those were just for a year or two, but I started working on things like lingerie,
Okay.
specific types of lingerie. They're very nuanced. You've got to have a certain angle. They want to see very specific kinds of lighting, and you have to treat it with, some delicate nature. You
Yeah.
gotta, yeah, it's not like you see on the movies at all. I got to the point where I was able to do that kind of with my eyes closed, and I was like, okay, I need another challenge. And what I realized, and thank God the photography world is big enough to house a lot of different interests. You know, you can do
Right.
landscapes. I've never been interested in that. You can do cars, no interest. You can do sports, definitely no interest for me. But
Yeah.
the thing that got me interested in that I swore I would never do when I was in school is weddings, because I had been going for 10 years. I worked at this studio
Okay.
and I went to the same building every day. There are no windows in this building. So if I'm
Oh,
lighting
wow.
a room scene and I've got this beautiful shaft of morning light coming in and hitting,
Right.
a product coming through, streaming through the windows, it's because I put a light back there, or it's because I put a scene behind the window to make it look like we're in Miami, but really we're in High Point, North Carolina, and we're in a windowless building. So I go into the same place for 10 years and I'm telling different stories for different companies. And that
Yeah.
was so much fun until it was like, all right, I feel like I've done this. But that was also about the time in history where weddings, because when I was in school, weddings were not interesting. Weddings were kind of like looked down on because it was what you did. Now everybody's 19, 20, full of themselves, lots of ego, right? Even if you're quiet about it. But it's like, okay, if you can't handle the big stuff, like some photojournalism, big shoot, or some sort of commercial shoot, okay, you go shoot your little wedding. And what I realized was that is exactly the challenge I needed at that point in my career,
Okay.
because not only was the environment changing, like people who would hire a wedding photographer were more apt to want something that looked like it was in a magazine
Yeah.
than in years before, where people just did the soccer pose
Yep.
and did what I call the fig leaf pose and smiled and called it good.
Yeah.
So I had all of this lighting knowledge. I had all of this I'd been working with a lot of models. So I knew how to pose people, not in a way that was portraity, but in a way that was uh, like you would see in a magazine. And that's what
Yes.
the brides wanted now. So also, I would be going to different places. every week, and I would be photographing the same story, which was completely opposite from what I was used to. I was used to going to the same place, photographing different products, creating different stories for different companies. Now I'm working with different people, but I'm really telling the same story over and over and over, because a wedding, right?
Yeah.
It's got a script. It's got a specific wardrobe. It's got a pretty specific cast of characters. You got your audience, you got your people on stage. And not only that, but the bumping up the level of complexity, which I'm always doing, even if it's unconscious. All of these things have to come together on the wedding day, but these are all amateur actors, and they've rehearsed this thing one time the day before, and we're all hoping it works out okay. And that's exactly the challenge that I needed, because I still have to show up and produce really great pictures, even if one of the groomsmen shows up drunk, or even if the bride takes 2 of her bridesmaids Xanax like 2 hours before the ceremony. She's completely catatonic in the corner of the room when I walk in, and I'm like, okay, is she gonna make
Right.
it? And then I'm thinking to myself, can they annul this? Like, if she's too out of it to agree to her vow? Yeah, that one worked out okay. Lots of Diet Pepsi was involved in bringing her around, but I had to photograph her, and she was in a daze, like she was staring off into space. So I was like, you know what? We're gonna make this a landscape photo, and we're gonna have a tiny little bride in the corner of the picture, because we were in a beautiful space. And I was like,
Yeah.
look at all these beautiful gardens. It's May. Look at all these flowers, and look at all these trees. And oh, yes, there is a bride who is completely out of her mind and can't focus her eyes on anything. So that's how we're gonna do this.
Yeah. Nice. That's fantastic from my perspective, because what I'm seeing here again is that innovator mindset of, all right, this isn't optimal. This isn't an optimal situation that I'm in, but I've got to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And just that perspective of realizing, all right, we've got all of these other things that are fantastic, amazing, eye catching, and I've still got to put her in it somehow. And so we're just going to rearrange the way this view is done. So we're getting what she wants, but also too, I'm getting what I want
Yeah.
out of this. So that's fantastic. And also too, I think it's a highlight moment for the audience of, as creatives, being able to look at things and adapt to what seems to be almost a potentially impossible situation that's going to take place. And are you going to be able to produce? Are you going to be able to accomplish what you're good at or trying to accomplish? But having that mind that starts brainstorming and problem solving immediately into figuring out, all right, I know I've still got my job I've got to do here, but I've got to work around this problem, this scenario that's not optimal. And if creatives can grab that little bit of information of, I need to have this as a mindset always in whatever I'm doing, then it's a little bit easier to navigate when you run into those situations that a lot of times they'd be crippling for a lot of creatives. They'd freak out. Like, well, what am I? This is not what I signed up for. This is
Right.
not what you gave me a deposit check for. This is not what I thought this day was going to be. I can't deal with this.
Like,
And
yeah, call me when both your eyes can focus in the same direction. Okay, please.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So I think that's something for the audience that's highly valuable, is to be able to problem solve in the moment and reconfigure what you can do, but make it so that it's what the client needs as well.
Yeah. And sometimes that's really tough. But I think a valuable first question to always ask yourself is, what can I do right now?
Right.
What is one little thing I could do, because I, even in that situation, I try, okay, I'll be back in 15 minutes. We'll see how things go. And I would come back and she'd be in a different position, but completely motionless, staring at a wall. I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to work with that. And then I go back out and start pacing and thinking, okay, what can we do? What can we do?
Right.
In the South, I don't know if anyone's heard this term, but in the South, we call it taking chicken shit and making chicken salad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was making chicken salad that day. That's all I was doing.
As you're stepping into this new world of weddings, I imagine as well, even though it's the same storyline, the same steps pretty much every single time, you're getting a new cast of characters every time. And for somebody who's very, very observant and wanting to see those different things, I imagine that was a scenario that was even more enticing for you wanting to step into that challenge. Did you realize that this is the same book every time,
Yeah.
but I get new characters?
Yeah.
Was that something that lit you up?
It was until a point where I found, because I loved people who, there were a lot of people who came to me because they saw my work, they saw the beautiful lighting, and they were what I kind of called the blank canvas folks. They didn't have a ton of personality themselves to bring
Okay.
to the photos. And so they were like, "Oh, he can make me look like this." This was an unspoken thing, but I
Yeah.
started to see the pattern enough times. And this was way back. This is like 15 more years ago. This was in my first like 5 years of
Okay.
shooting weddings. So I started coming up on these people who were, I'm like, okay, so what are you looking for? And they're like, oh, you just do what you do. And I was like, to most people, that would be a compliment, maybe, that, oh, they trust me. They trust me to handle this. They've got it. But I was looking for at least a little bit of collaboration, like a co-creator to some
Right.
extent. And there were a lot of clients I wasn't getting that. And so I would go in and I would just rock it. They would be really happy. I would do some wildly dramatic lighting, dramatic angles, make that dress pop, make them look like they were on the cover of a romance novel or whatever it was. And they were like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I want. But man, it wasn't them. It wasn't real to them. It wasn't real to anything. It was just kind of like, okay, cool. I'm just, my job is to take cool pictures at weddings now.
Right.
And I started to feel a little weird about that, because I thought my job was to take cool pictures of these people getting married on this special day in their life. And there got to be a point where I was like, okay, this is my life now. And I had to figure out how to fix that. And I had to get creative again and just start slowly filtering out people who were more about the image. And also, you have to think, that's about when Facebook was coming around. That's about when people were doing it for the gram. People weren't quite doing it for the gram yet. This
Right.
was
Right.
earlier than that. But man, that
MySpace.
mentality was starting to creep in
Yeah.
to pictures. So yeah, that was a little weird.
Yeah. And also, just another highlight moment here for the audience. You said filtering out
Mm,
the people that you didn't really want to work with. And I think that's another key thing for creatives. Sometimes we have a hard time coming to that type of a decision
yeah.
of, or they think, we think we have to take everything that comes to us. But when you truly get into a place of realizing, I only want to be doing the stuff that makes me feel good
Mm,
about my creative journey. I only want to work with people that light me up, that fill my heart up, that fill my spirit up. You have to start thinking about, all right, I can say no to some of these because it's not going to align with what I'm trying to accomplish in life and the journey that I'm on. It's not going to align right. And being able to say no to certain people, whether they come to the, table with a checkbook that's limitless, but they don't have the personality, they don't have the vibe that I want to work. They may be overbearing. You weigh that out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, this could be the moneymaker, but do I want to deal with all the drama, all the aggravation that's going to go with it? Do I want somebody over my shoulder
Mm.
every minute of this process saying, grab this, grab that, grab this shot over here? Those are things that don't get known to a creative early on. And that's why I want to highlight it here, because if those early creators can realize you don't have to take every opportunity that comes in front of you just because that's what you think you have to do early on, is take everything that comes in front of you and try to figure out how to make it work. You can immediately set up a standard of when you want to say no,
Mm-hmm.
when you want to say, I appreciate it, but it's not going to be for me today. And then let them walk back out the door and you can relax until the next person comes to you.
Yeah. And I would love to highlight a second thing about that is important to think about for people who are early in their creative career. The word no is scary because they think if they say the word no, they won't get
Another.
another opportunity.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that many times. And I've experienced also, not saying no. And then, like you say, sort of regretting because you get the kind of clients that you knew you were going to get. But at the same time, you didn't want to, you had that FOMO of, will I ever get to work again? But then I experienced this as you get later in your career. I avoided no because I got this ego thing where I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to say yes to this because I'm creative. And even though I think this might suck, I'm creative enough to maybe fool myself into thinking I can turn it around or make it into something that's not going to suck. And
Right.
it's almost like, well, gosh, if I was really creative, I should be able to figure this out. And so you say yes, knowing that it's going to be difficult, but knowing that also you're creative, you can handle difficult things. And then you just get yourself in a spot you don't want to ultimately be in. So I think in my experience later in your career, it's also difficult to say no, but for completely different reasons.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for highlighting that as well, because it's true. Very much true. Later on, it's for all different reasons than what it is when you're first starting out.
Yeah.
You have a whole lot of journey behind you already, and you've seen a whole lot of different things, but also too, the decisions become different at that point as well.
Very. Yeah.
One of the things that we highlighted was the fact that you're a dad.
Yeah.
How long into your marriage, into your working career, did that come about for you? And how did that change your perception, maybe into what you were doing and how you were going to move forward versus how your parents were for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was what, so we were really intentional about kids. We were both the firstborn, and we both had several siblings under us. And we decided that we were going to be married for at least 10 years before we would have kids.
Oh,
We
wow.
wanted to be pretty mature in our career, mature enough in our career, but not mature enough in our biology, I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
you could say, to make it work so that we could provide what we wanted to for the kids and not be like young and scraping along. Nothing wrong with that. But that's just the decision we made. So we were just above 30 when we had our first
Okay.
kid. And that was weird because we both of us were really close to our grandparents, and our parents weren't I don't know. There's something about the generation of my parents and hers as well that they're like grandparents. Like that's for old people. I don't know what you're talking about, but you got a cute kid, go raise them. Uh, our parents weren't very involved in our kids' lives, and we didn't anticipate that. My grandparents were still alive at that point, and they of course were all about it, but
Yeah, yeah.
they were getting to the point where they were really up there in age, and I think it was my oldest was around 4 or 5 when all of that generation kind of died off. So
All right.
he didn't really get to experience, what I got to experience, which
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, we were the first of our friend group to get married, and we were
Okay.
the last of our friend group to have kids.
Oh,
So
wow.
everybody was looking at us like, everything all right? And we're like, yeah, we're loving life. We're traveling. We're doing all this stuff. We're working hard.
Yeah.
And then we'll have kids when we decide. But when the kids came about, our firstborn, he was around with us for like 4.5 years. He went everywhere with us. We were self-employed at that time. So as soon as I knew I had a kid coming along, I was like, well, James, if you don't go off on your own at this point, you probably will get trapped by the golden handcuffs of like safety and security. So knowing that, which sounds crazy, but I already had a year's worth of weddings booked up. And that's when I left the studio job.
Okay.
So I did a little of both for a
Yeah.
while until I had enough of that financial security to say, okay, if I can keep repeating this, if I can keep working hard, I can make it, do
Yeah.
my own thing. So that's when, again, all these things happen at once. I quit my job, start a company, have a kid, and then move to a different town not too long after that. And that started the next 15 years. But had the first one, and then not quite 5 years later, had the second one. So I've got 2 kids.
2 kids? Okay. Female, male?
The
One
boy, he's 22. He's about to graduate college in
Oh,
a couple
wow.
months. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Right
the other one, I still drive her around. She's 17. She could drive if she wanted to, but she doesn't. But I'm about to get her. She's gotten out of school, but she goes to ballet 6 days a week, so it's like her job.
Nice.
She's done it since she was 3, but she's 17, and yeah, I still see her like, if not every day, every other day in the car. I'm her personal chauffeur. I ask her to give me 5 stars every time I drop her off.
Nice.
She rolls her eyes. It's great.
The, the aspect of her being 17 and not driving yet, is that an interesting scenario for you?
Blows my mind. Blows my mind.
It
I
blows
don't
my
understand
mind as well.
it.
It
I
blows
don't
my mind as
understand it.
well.
It's not like I mean, she's got her permit, and we got on the road. You've got to get like 60, 100 hours. I don't know how much it is now.
Yeah.
Get her on the road. She goes to ballet 6 days a week. So there's a little interstate happen in between there. It's an easy drive. It's a straight line. I figured, okay, it's 30 minutes a day. We're going to knock this out in like 2 months. It's not going to be a big deal at all.
Yeah.
And she got out there 2 or 3 times. She did okay. And then she was just like, yeah, I'm just too nervous. Something in the water with anxiety with kids this age now. I don't know what it is, but with everyone I talk to in my generation, they're like, yeah, I was blazing a trail. There's like fire behind me as I ran out the door. And I was like, yeah, that was me too. And now that's just not the way.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I see it with my nephews even. And it's, one of those things where it's like, what's happening here? What is this shift either in mindset or society, or is it just the anxiety level is just too high for the capacity to take on that type of environment? It's very interesting to look at and observe, especially from an observer's perspective, right?
Yeah,
Knowing what we did by that age.
totally. Yeah, because I think with us, we had to go places to experience things, and you could communicate with your friends over the phone if you wanted to do that. That was kind of a pain because then you couldn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
Had the mobile phone. You might have had a cordless phone if you were cool, but that was still hooked to a base that was hooked to a cord that was hooked to the wall in your house. So you couldn't really go outside and talk to anybody. But
Right.
I think kids can experience so much in that little black box that's in front of them now without having to go anywhere that it's like actually having to go somewhere is kind of a hassle for
Yeah.
them. That's just the vibe I get from it. Is
Right. Right.
yeah.
Sure. For sure. Once you've been into the wedding photography scene and the social media channels are starting to come into life,
Yeah.
and you're starting to see that, wait a second, the client is wanting something from me because I can produce it, but yet it's for different reasons now as
Yeah.
well. How is that starting to change the way that you're looking at your career, your skill set, the way that you're operating as a entrepreneur, all of those different things?
Yeah. That's where a lot of maturity happened for me because at this point in my career, I'm still, if we're going back, I was still in my probably early mid 30s,
Yeah.
getting into the latter part of my 30s, and I still had a little bit of like, I'm cool enough to do better than this, but they
Mhm.
they keep asking me for this other stuff. And one day I went to a Steve Miller concert.
Okay.
Steve Miller.
Yeah.
And he made some awesome songs back in like 1968. He made the Joker.
Yeah.
And
Classic.
yeah, we're talking, this was maybe 2010 at this
Yeah.
point. And Steve Miller came to town and he sang every one of those songs I remember from being a kid on the radio. And he
Yeah.
sang them exactly like I heard them on the radio. And I was like, damn, he didn't trick them up. He didn't like start with 30 minutes of his new stuff because he had a new album out.
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking. It got me thinking, like, this dude has been singing these songs for like 40 plus years at least.
Yeah.
And if I went to this concert and he didn't play the Joker, I'd have been mad. Like, as a person
Yeah.
who loved his songs, loved what he was doing. And it made me take a really hard look at myself and what I was doing in my attitude about what creativity was for me. I was thinking creativity, oh, you come out with a new album, you come out with a new song every time you shoot a wedding, and it's supposed to be different. Well, no. For me, it started to be like, okay, if I'm going to go to a concert with an artist I love, I want to hear their best stuff. And they are probably sick to death of singing what I consider to be their best stuff. But
Right.
they do it because they know their fans want it. They know their fans love it. They know their fans expect it. And I was
Yeah.
like, crap, that's my life now. I'm not famous, but I'm still supposed to do my greatest hits
Yeah.
in the form of photography every time I go to a wedding. So I changed my mindset. And I was like, okay, this person, they kind of want my greatest hits, but I'm going to sprinkle a few from a new album in there. That's
Okay.
the way I started thinking about it. And I got a lot more at peace with that process because I was still able to go into a situation that was not predictable. And sometimes people wanted something that just wasn't realistic. They said, "Oh, I love that shot you do." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you're getting married at night, and that shot has sunlight flooding into the doors as you open them up or whatever it might be." And I'm like, "You're getting married at 6 o'clock in December. I don't know how we're going to pull that off, but miracles happen. I mean, we can have a meteor come through and shine a bright light just at the right moment. I don't know,
Yeah.
but we'll see what we can do." But then I would sprinkle some of the new things I wanted to do in there and see what the reaction was. And then, of course, what people see, they ask for. So I would take some things off the website and I would put some things on the website to give people different inspiration.
Okay. Okay. One of the things that we highlighted in the intro was the fact that you've created a podcast and you're working on a book as well, both titled A Joyful Rebellion. And how we described that as coming about was partly where hard earned success starts to feel empty. And also to reclaiming joy, reclaiming creativity, reclaiming authenticity after life's hard resets.
Yeah.
Can we dive into some of that backstory
Yeah.
in terms of, all right, how did that even start to take place? Or what was the realization that these things needed to take place?
Yeah. Well, you don't get through life without hard bumps and scrapes in some way. And as I was approaching that year 40 in my life, things started to unravel, and they weren't anything that was directly around me. They were in the extended circle. So
Okay.
this is like grandparents dying.
Yeah.
But you expect that. People age, their bodies don't last forever. And so that was one thing. But
Yeah.
then one of my grandparents died, and that kind of uncovered a bigger scandal that was going on in my family where some of my siblings were kind of manipulating her for financial
Oh,
purposes,
wow. Okay.
which I didn't know this until it all came to light. And then right before that, one of my siblings dies, overdose. And just for all the listeners, drugs are bad, just like the principal in South Park says.
Right.
And so we've got that. That turns out he was one of the worst offenders of
Manipulation.
manipulation with my grandmother, who died about a year later. But she kept the secret until she died. And then financial records are what they are. You can't
Yeah.
really uncover that. So there was just a whole big thing that started to happen. And then it wasn't a couple years after that that all the grandparents were gone and there wasn't that support system anymore. But I wasn't using them for that kind of support. I was like pushing 40. So it was more like, oh, things are okay.
Yeah.
So I wasn't calling them for advice at that point in my life, but it was like, okay, they're fine until they weren't. And then
Hmm.
they're gone. And there's like,
Right.
oh crap. And then a couple years later, my mom dies suddenly. And then my siblings are all looking at me because I'm the oldest, and they're like, okay, you handle all this. And it was a pretty disjointed situation,
Yeah.
pretty traumatic. And so I'm handling it, but I go into what I call robot mode, which is when I have to do something, I can just totally focus and get it done. And I don't remember much of it. And everyone around me is like, dude, what the hell happened to you? And I got the thing done, but it was a pretty straight line.
Yeah.
And I can't say that there was any creativity that went into it. It was just A, B, C, D. Let's get through this. Let's get it done. Let's get it back to life,
Right.
but get it back to my life. And it seemed like that kept happening every other year for enough years to where I was in robot mode for so long
Oh, wow.
that like a lot of my really close relationships were like, dude, he's lost it. And
Mm.
I was at the level in my work life where I could go in completely, like the day after my mom died, I had a huge magazine shoot that I had to do.
Oh, okay.
I found out she died at 9 o'clock the night before, and I rolled in there at like 7:30 in the morning. Like I was in robot mode, and I got it done, shot the cover of the magazine, shot a bunch of inside pages, and I got it done, and I left. And a week later, people were like, oh my God, I found out you're,
Mom passed.
yeah. And I was like, yeah. And they were like, well, why did you show up? I was like, You'd hired like 6 models. There was a lot riding on me being there, and I'm not she wasn't gonna get better if I'm not there.
Hmm.
So why not just pass the time in a productive way? She was 3 states away also. So
Uh,
it wasn't like I could rush to a bedside or anything. It was what was done was done. And so I spent the next week and really several years dealing with working through that. But then that was the end of my marriage relationship too. It was the beginning of the end, I guess, because
yeah.
I just wasn't the person who was showing up the way I needed to be or the way they needed me to be, I guess is the better way to put it. And so again, we just start going through a couple of years of, okay, let's get through this. Let's get through this hit. Let's get through that. And enough of those, you start talking to people. And then people are starting to talk about their own stuff that happens and their own
Yeah.
hopes and dreams and their own things they had to put aside because, life happened. And the more I thought about it, after the dust settled, this is 10, 12 years later, after the dust settled, I was like, people in this age range, they got a lot in common. They've been through some stuff.
Right.
And a lot of us, we did all the things we were told to do. You go to school, you get that high school diploma, then you go to get that. There's a scene in Fight Club. I don't know if you remember it, but Brad Pitt's in the bathtub basically, and he said, "Yeah, I called my dad, and he said, I said I graduated high school. What do I do now?" He said, "Well, go to college." And so I went to college and I graduated college. I called my dad and he said, "Well, what do I do now?" And he said, "Go get a job." It's like, "Okay, Dad, I got a job. What do I do now?" "Get married." And you do all that stuff. You get the 2.5 kids, you get the house, you get the picket fence, you get the extra coverage on your car insurance, and you're you're set, right? You do all this stuff people told you would do, make you successful. And
Yeah.
then the part they left off, the part that was silent in that was they implied that if you're successful, you're happy. And that's where it all kind of falls apart because you work hard, you get to this level that you checked all the boxes, and people say, "Oh, yeah, you're doing great." And people are like, "Oh, I wish I had you're like, you got it all together." People told me that for so long. And I'm like, dude, you have no idea. And you're looking around, you're thinking, I got all this stuff. I got no joy.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, I don't even know who I am anymore at this point. And people right now all over the world are like asking themselves the question right now, like, what am I going to do to get to that place of joy? Like, what am I going
Hmm.
to have to give up? And sometimes they're running towards something, sometimes they're running away from something. The
Yeah.
most successful people are the ones who are running towards something because they kind of know they figured it out. The people running away from something, sometimes that's by necessity. Sometimes you just have to get out of a situation, and that's totally valid. But in my experience talking with people, it's there's a time in people's lives, and it can happen a couple of different times. But you got to make that decision. Like, how am I going to change things to get that joy that I really want? And the rebellion is called a joyful rebellion because sometimes the rebellion, and oftentimes the rebellion, is going against what you were always taught by your
Yeah.
church, by your school, by your guidance counselor, by your parents. And it's, I talk to so many people who have done that later in life, and they're like, man, it changed everything. And they wouldn't have gotten to that part had they not gone through the hard years. So you don't want to take the hard years away because they're informative, but at the same time, it also does make the joy part a lot sweeter.
For sure. With all of those things taking place, when you shift into robot mode and you're just doing what needs to be done to get through, how is the mental state at that point? Are you internally breaking down as well? Because externally, you said everything is starting to break down. Are you internally breaking down? And if so, are you realizing it?
I think that's the biggest thing. I don't realize it, but also I am keeping everything together. So from the outside, it's looking like, okay, all these external things, but James has got this figured out. But you're right. On the inside, I'm like, I don't have this figured out, but I'm going to put this foot in front of this foot, and then I'm going to take another step. And when I have to get really linear, like that's when my creativity shuts down. And I'm not really breaking down mentally, I guess,
Okay.
but everything else gets pushed to the side. All the
Gotcha.
joy, all the fun, all the understanding, all of whatever people talk about when they say the word empathy. No, I'm kidding. But that's seriously part of it, though. I become really business like, and again, it's only happened. I can think of 3, maybe 4 major times where I've had to go more than a few hours in
Okay.
this kind of state. And I only see it looking in hindsight, but I'm like, okay, that was a pretty major trauma response because I was going through like this big hit of, oh wow, the world is very different than it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And at the same time, people are looking at me to make it better for them and kind of smooth it over or fix it in some way.
Right.
So it wasn't like I could grieve with them. I had to be the one to step up and be like, okay, I'll take care of this for you. And, we have to do that sometimes in life. And after many years of reflection and little bit of therapy, I realized, okay, that's what I do if that happens. So now I have tools to make sure it doesn't happen
Right.
anymore. But luckily for me, I'm the next generation that dies. So it's like
Gotcha.
I don't have to deal with that too much more
Gotcha.
on people older than me anyway.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask next is if you did reach out to an external person to be able to sit down and talk to them. And the reason for me asking that is because as males, a
Yeah.
lot of times that is looked at in a completely different way than if a female decides they need that in their life for a
Yeah.
period of time.
Yeah.
For you, was it helpful to the point of now I'm getting this out, I'm being able to get some feedback of why I'm feeling this way or why these emotions are coming up or taking over, and I can't tap into my creativity to resolve this,
Hmm.
so I'm sitting here. Was
Yeah.
that something that did for you?
It actually it uncovered totally different, unrelated thing. Well, I say unrelated, but everything's related. So I was at this point I was 40 and I was going to see someone because I was like, okay, life just sucks and I don't know. What is it, me? Is it
Yeah,
life? But something sucks and I'm pissed off and annoyed about everything. And I guess I need to figure this out. So I went and talked to someone. And after several sessions of talking about, okay, the relationship was degrading, all these things that happened that were traumatic, and I'm having to deal with kind of the business end of them. And she looks at me one day and she said, have you ever considered that you might have ADD? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, that's a fake thing that my brothers invented back in the 80s so they could get out of detention at
right.
school for being assholes. And she's like, no, it's a real thing. You might want to check into it. And I was like, well, okay, what do you mean? And she's like, okay, for example, what does your calendar look like? It's like, what are you talking about? Like your calendar where you keep your appointment, like where you put down that you had this appointment. And I was like, I don't have a calendar. Well, how did you know to get here? I just remembered we set this up and like I knew it was here. I knew it was this time. And it
Yeah,
was like, okay, this is a good example of someone who may store a little too much in their head because they don't have a system. And that's consistent with, and she was really nice about it, but I mean, she was painting a picture of, oh, okay, I have some broken systems. in my
Yeah.
life. I have some broken ways of conducting my life. And to be fair, my wife at the time, she was my business partner. She kept all of the details. Like she felt very important and useful keeping all of those appointments, all of the things for the business. She would do all the financials. She would do all the back end. I would do all
Yeah.
the creative, front of the house kind of stuff. And we worked beautifully that way until we didn't anymore. And I had to figure out how to do everything. And that's when I landed in that chair. And she's telling me that I may have ADD. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll look into it. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, yeah, there's a picture of me right there in the dictionary. And now I've got that's why people have always been asking me if I'm lost whenever I'm going somewhere, because that guy right there has ADD. So I had to work through that. That was the biggest revelation of going to therapy. Just have someone who knows what they're talking about, not your friend who read an article in,
Right.
Women's Day magazine or Cosmopolitan, but they actually did some training and they can tell you something about yourself you didn't know before. And that blew my mind. And that set me on a path to figure out, okay, how do let's deal with this first. So I
Mhm.
really did try to deal with that first. And I didn't make so many, I can only handle so many systems, but I made some really core systems. Like now I live and die by my calendar. Like
Okay.
the, and our appointment on this calendar is color coded. Every day and task is color coded based on, like, if I'm working on the podcast, it's color coded yellow. If I'm working on photos, it's color coded red. In a little while, I'll go pick up my daughter. It's color coded blue, so that way I know it's like a personal thing.
Yeah.
And I keep everything in there now. So I wouldn't say I'm obsessive with it, but I am really, really organized now.
Okay.
Whereas before, it was just like whatever.
Yeah. You're just operating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to throw you some flowers here because to make that decision to go and sit down with somebody is, like I started off with the question initially, it's a big step for a male to do that, to be willing to do that. And also, too, going back to early on in the conversation, it's you being your own advocate again. And I
Mm,
want to highlight that for you because when, as creatives, when we're dealing with internal stuff, internal mind stuff, the world is not the same
yeah.
at all. And it's hard to navigate that. And if you're not your own advocate to try and decipher what's taking place, what's going on, why do I feel this way right now?
Mm,
Because I'm not used to this feeling. That it's not what I'm used to. To say I need to talk to somebody else who has some more information than what I'm readily able to access,
yeah.
and has a different perspective, a different angle. Like you being that photographer, you're all about angles all the time. And in this instance, you've got to look to somebody else who has a different angle to be able to give some perspective on what you're trying to frame of your own life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a special thing for a male to do that, even a female, but a little bit more for a male because society doesn't allow that to
Mm,
be a norm,
yeah.
right? So I just want to throw those flowers out for you, as well as highlight that for the audience of, hey, this is an option. It's a good option. It doesn't always work out for everybody on the first
Mm,
try. Sometimes, and I know this from my own personal experience, sometimes it takes a whole bunch of tries
mm,
over many years before you lock in with the right person who gets you and is also willing to allow you to continue to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Because as creatives, we're constantly exploring and looking for things that are enticing, that are beautiful,
Yeah.
that are eye catching, right? That are drawing our attention. And we're constantly doing that. I've had to do that with my own mental health journey in finding healing over the course of the years. And I've been in psychotherapy and cognitive therapy since 1994, consistently. Not until 2012, and looking outside of traditional medicine, looking at a healer who's an energy healer, did I really tap into some deep healing of some things that were just generational.
Yeah.
As we know in the South, certain things that we experience are generational, right? Those things just trickle down the hill or the mountain. We know that's the case, but when we're looking at it from the mental health standpoint, we don't understand that that's also the case.
Yeah.
And so, for the audience that's listening to this conversation, be your own advocate always. Be willing to look at things from somebody else's perspective sometimes if you need it. If you're in a place where you can't find that option for your own self on your own, be willing to step out and allow someone else to have some perspective on your life that may bring something to light that you're looking at and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that that was there from that angle. And that's a thing which is very powerful having this conversation with you, because as a photographer, somebody who's been in that world of angles and light for pretty much your entire career, being able to step outside of that and get somebody else's perspective, that's a huge thing to do. It's a huge thing to let that guard down as that
Yeah.
creative person and to be willing to say, okay, I don't have the answer here. Let me see if somebody else does. And I want to thank you for sharing that as well, because
Yeah.
that's truly highlighted as a beneficial component for the creative community. Because you may see it as much as I do, but mental health conversation in the world is not loud enough. And it's even at a lower volume in the creative world. And I'm trying to turn that sucker up to 11,
Yeah.
if not more, because I've walked it. I know what it's like. As one of the other elements that we touched on in your intro is the creative mentoring
Mm.
that you're working and doing and trying to be for other creatives. What is something that you've been able to see in that process of where that brings that joyfulness to what you're doing currently?
Yeah. It's kind of wild because I work with a lot of students, and I work a little bit with people who are a little further in their career, but a lot of times I'll take on an intern from a
Okay.
photo school. Right now, I'm working with some photojournalism students to make a documentary film. And the thing I keep going back to, which is so strange because it's like I'm coming not even full circle, but I'm coming to where I should have been if I think about it right. But I keep encouraging them. Photography, videography is one of those fields where it does require a little black box to create the art. And a lot of times people get fixated on the little black box. They're like, oh, I got this cool camera. I got this great lens. I'm going to be able to do these things. And I keep having to remind them it's not about the black box. You could pick up any little black box and you could make some good results. What it's about is the relationships with the people who are in front of that little black box. It,
Yeah.
it's about mastering that little piece of equipment to the level where it almost disappears. So it does take a lot of practice. You don't want to dismiss it because it is very much required to get the resulting art that you want to create. But treat it in a way that for your subject and for yourself, it's not a barrier between you and them. It is a necessary thing that has to come up, but spend more time in the humanity of it than you spend with that thing in front of your face. And that's probably the message I keep harping on, because I feel like if I had heard that when I was 20,
Yeah.
I would have maybe been a little farther along a little sooner in my
Yeah.
career when it came, because people are much more interesting than stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I discovered after probably about after 6 years of being a commercial photographer, and the thing that got me into weddings, even though I said I'd never do it, is that in the commercial world, and I tell this to students all the time, as soon as that picture is complete, it starts to lose value, because within a month or two, the next season is going to roll
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Within a month or two, that magazine is going to be off the racks. It's going to be another issue comes along. So whatever work you put into the cover, yeah, you still care about it. It's in your portfolio. You can feel good. But if I'm at a wedding and as soon as I take a picture of someone's grandmother or them cutting the cake or whatever it is, that picture, that slice of time, that little time capsule, it it increases in value from that moment on, because we're getting further and further away from that moment. The memory fades. And the thing is, and there's trade-off with everything. The thing is, that picture only matters to those specific people. It's not gonna
Right.
it's not like a band poster where, you know,
Yeah.
a million people can love it for a couple of years on their wall of their bedroom. It's like, okay, this handful of people are going to love these pictures probably forever, because grandma's not going to be around. And, they're going to look back on it in 30 years and going to say, oh, we were so young. We were so cute. Whatever the case is, that kind of hooked me with regard to photographing people,
Yeah.
because those increase over time. And I wanted to put my energy into something that was going to increase in value. So, yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mentor people.
I think that's a perfect place for us to be able to close out today, James. Just that message to those who are coming up now, the ones that you're working with, even. One of the things I also want to leave the audience with at the end of each one of these episodes is just a gentle reminder. And I think this is something that's been shown throughout your storyline as well. And that is for creatives to always listen to their heart, but also be kind to your mind.
Yeah.